Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Mom Series, The Misunderstanding of Multiplicity. My name is Maria. Happy autumn. Happy September 22nd. So this is a follow-up and review on the 24 Faces of Billy Milligan, Monsters Inside. I don't know where to begin, but I'm going to just go for it. I said I did a video a while ago about this, and it was in response really to Entropy's system, Winnie, where she's speaking about boycotting Apple TV Podcast Plus, A Crowded Room, where they were going to do a cameo appearance and real life footage mixed with an actor to play Billy and kind of like try to put his story together as James Cameron's original vision was to do, having Leonardo DiCaprio play Billy Milligan. What Netflix has done is phenomenal. They've gotten ahead of that. Apple Plus podcast was dragging its feet on the date. I agree that there should be no at this point, there's enough footage, real life, and people that worked with Billy for many, many years, and also his family, and friends, and girlfriends, and every psychiatrist doctor that saw him, every medical tech that saw him, policemen, prosecutors, lawyers, they have all that. So, I thought better to not boycott the story of Billy Milligan because it's a very important story. Because it actually is the oedipus of what uh, people with DID and MPD go through. There are believers in society of what MPD DID is, and there are non-believers. There are believers in the psychiatric community, the medical community, and psychologists, and non-believers. And then there's super believers, and then there's super non-believers. And then even amongst ourselves in the community, there are camps of believers of what DID, MPD is. In our own experiences, there are people that believe there are healthy multiples, there's no disorder in it, there's no gag in time or gaps or lagging time or time slowing down or speeding up or the clock going around too fast and not remembering what you did, a little amnesia. There's none of that. And then there's people that believe there's a whole lot of that, and that is the disorder is a memory problem, right? And with that comes the inner conflict of power and what's going on and what to do and who's doing what and clear negotiation. So the oedipus of, is there MPDDID? Is it a real thing? Will it always be considered a hysterical response or a response to suggestion from a doctor? Will it always just be considered a hysterical neuroses from trauma or malingering? And with malingering, remember there has to be gain. There's got to be something you're gaining from it. Or just wanting to be a good patient and iatrogenically falling into suggestibility and gullibility being at the root of that. Needing an answer. Why is this happening? So you fall into it. So that's always been the crux and always the non-believers and believers. Billy's case, which sadly doesn't highlight the victims, the true victims, enough, really goes to look at Netflix. What Netflix did is they broke it down into 4 parts, 4 hours, 4 series, 4 episodes. It's out there now. It's time limited. Get over to Netflix and see it. Again, it's called The 24 Monsters Inside the 24 Faces of Billy Milligan. And the reason, after seeing the whole thing, you'll understand why it is called Monsters Inside. Spoiler alert, spoiler alert. He did have a deathbed confession, and he confessed to his sister's daughter. Throughout this entire documentary, my heart went out to his sister, Kathy Preston, his brother, Jim Morrison, his mother, and his niece. And then the friends that rallied around him that always knew him and always just knew Billy, and he was just this shy, sweet, innocent kid. And then others that were like, no, he was obstinate, he was difficult, he was defiant, he was. So there were two different stories of Billy going on. And by the time Billy was 14, he was put into a psychiatric institution. His mom believed that that was the best thing for him because of his acting out behavior and criminal behavior and stealing, assault. He was hitting people. He was acting out. He was at the age of 14 doing that behavior. By the age of 16, 17, he was involved in a robbery, beating, and someone else was raped. So she did everything she could to get him all the help she could. And Billy's mom said something very interesting in the beginning of the episode. She said she remembered when Billy was a small child and that Billy was her heart and her firstborn boy, and then came Kathy, and Kathy was a year behind Billy, and then Jim. Billy, uh, Billy's, she got married young, and there's so much to this story, you guys. I have index cards like this thick that I took on it. I'm just gonna try to go off the cuff because it's distracting to look at all that. Plus, I can't even understand my handwriting half the time. It's all over the place. He had such a tragic beginning. He really did. And the mother makes no bones about that. They did all the right things. She was abandoned as a young child by her father and her mother, and ended up living with her grandparents, who were very strict Catholic and gave her all the opportunities to do and to grow and blossom. And she did in a very strict environment, and learned that a woman has her place, and also learned that she was very talented and she wanted to go sing. She met a young man in high school, and he was talented, she was talented. They went off to sing, got married. The marriage didn't last long. She continued to entertain, met a man in the entertainment field again who was a comedian, a heavy drunk cocaine user comedian, who was very vile. And that was Billy and Kathy and Jim's father. So their father killed himself. And she went on and got married a third time because she believed she needed a man to support her three children. And back in that time period, you did what you did. A woman with three children, divorced in that era. She wanted to be a housewife. She still wanted to entertain. She still wanted to do all those things and have a nice house for her kids and the whole bit, right? She met a very charming man. He had an older daughter. Billy's mom adopted his daughter, and he adopted her children, three children. Billy's siblings, and they went on. This seems to be the man that inflicted the most abuse on Billy. Billy became the target of abuse in the family, both by his sister Kathy Preston's recall and brother Jim. Not only did they witness their mother being nearly killed, often, bloodied, dragged across the floor by the hair, trigger warnings, and but that he would take Billy and Jim out to the shed or the barn or the garage, a like a tool shed that was made in the back of the house for regular beatings. And he seemed to be harder on Billy always. And Billy just took it and cowered. And the more he cowered, the more, according to his brother who was there with him, the more he was the target. Kathy also says he was the target. And that she, and I mentioned this in a video the other day, that by the age of 6, and Billy was 7, she was 6, that she could be in bed at night and actually train her brain to know by the way the car drove up and turned into the driveway and how he got out of the car if it was going to be a violent night. Billy had no respect for the policeman because he saw his mother be beaten over and over again, bloodied, her hair pulled out of her head, swollen eye, face, lip, teeth missing, the whole bit. And when the police would get there, they would never take away the man. They would get the two to calm down, go to his sister's house, go here, go to a friend's house, blah, 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 separate a little bit, but never take away the man to jail. And Billy actually asked the policeman, "Why don't you take him away? Why are you letting him continue to hurt her?" And the policeman said, "Maybe she ought to be a better wife, and this wouldn't happen." That was hard to stomach because it hit me close to home, and it hits so many women there still. There is still such an attitude of submission, being a good wife, and maybe it's all just our fault. We're all just crazy and driving our husbands crazy, and it's our fault, right? Okay, so there's that. So Kathy Preston is a very empathetic, intelligent sister who was a teacher, who was always there for her brother. Her brother was always there for her. She looked up to him. She couldn't believe that he would actually rape anyone. The minute she saw Billy in court, she knew it wasn't Billy. Billy was gone. She said she couldn't find him. Looking at him, he was just clueless. And when they picked him up from 3 rapes that happened within a 3-week period in October 1977 on the campus of Columbus, he was the infamous campus rapist. And leave it. He would never do that to a woman, never. But she also realized Billy was gone. There was something, not like nothing was happening between his eyes, his ears. He was just blank. And he continued with that behavior in the jail in investigation. And the very first therapist that was brought in, a psychologist, I'm sorry, to examine Billy was Dr. Sheila Porter, who at the time worked for the jail in Ohio, and his lawyers called her in to. They'd seen some strange behavior with him. He would curl up in the fetal position. He would he had some strange eye movements when he was talking to them. He kind of looked like he was going into headaches and maybe even seizures. He had some eyes rolling back in his head, fluttering of his eyes, holding his head, um, talking in a very frightened voice, and over again he would say, "I was asleep. I didn't do it. I was asleep." And then they heard, "Billy's asleep." So when they heard him referring to himself as third person, "Billy's asleep," they asked her to come in and examine him for competency to stand trial, to assist in his own defense, and to understand what's going on. It was a competency hearing for his sanity. Okay, so generally, all they need to know is, did the person know right from wrong? Were they in their right state of mind when they were doing the crime? And do they know what they're being charged of now? And can they assist? And are they suicidal or a danger to others because of the population they'd have to be in? She started to feel right away that he spoke through his art, that he recoiled, that that he was just a shell of a man there. They couldn't get a grasp of who Billy was. They started bringing in his family and questioning. And she believed that he should be worked up for dissociative disorders not otherwise specified, and look around and see if any trauma responses could have caused any personality changes. At the time, she was thinking dissociative fugue state, dissociative fugues, which is just kind of a big amnesia that can happen after you do something, after a shock, or after you're involved in something that you can't believe you did. Just it's shock, okay. And a fugue state can last a minute, an hour, a couple days, or a couple years, and it goes away as quick as it showed up. Just there's no treatment for it. So they needed to know where he was at. Eventually, they got another therapist in there, and then they called Dr. Harding, Dr. George Harding. Harding Hospital was not far from there. It was a very well-known hospital where Dr. George Harding worked, and he consulted on cases often. So they all got together and decided they needed Dr. Cornelia Wilbur because he was speaking in different accents, showing different behavior, and continually saying that he was asleep during the attack, that he was asleep. And then they would hear this reference to being on spot. A lot of times when people with DID or MPD, what it used to be called, switch or are out with executive function, running the body, or out and about talking to you and me, they will be said to be fronting or out front or in the light. What others were referencing, actually what they determined later, one of the therapists, there were so many psychiatrists, I can name so many, that saw him. At one point, somebody, they don't know who it is yet, said, "You caught me. I'm on the spot." Okay, so that was taken like a double message there, like, caught me in a lie. I'm on the spot, like I'm in the hot seat here. But Dr. Wilbur turned that into, now, what on the spot means is he's out front, and we caught a personality who was hiding. So Dr. Wilbur and Dr. Harding really pushed this multiple personality thing forward. They really mobilized it forward. And all the other doctors were really young doctors. They didn't have any experience with it. And they kind of looked up, except for one doctor. She was just kind of like, nah, and another doctor. Um, but there were doctors that were like, okay, there was more and more science coming about it. They had had Three Faces of Eve, um, the story of Sybil, Shirley R. Dalmason. So they weren't going to question her. More importantly, the judge, Judge J.C. Flowers, couldn't question Dr. Harding and Dr. Wilbur after all the hours of sessions. Problem is, they used heavy duty hypnosis along with sodium amytal, powerful suggestions, and in this docudrama, we get to hear that they used truth serum with him. They drugged him a lot. They put him into trance states, and Dr. Wilbur would make powerful suggestions of who was around him, who's there, how old are they, what do they do, invite them out. She was very flamboyant and very dramatic. When it came to trying to fuse Billy and his 24 personalities, she would just like almost like wave an invisible wand and be like, okay, Tommy, Arthur, Ellen, you're going to fuse now. Fuse. And even Billy would kind of look up, or whoever it was, in these tapes of him in session with her. He would look up like, okay, I'm gonna go with Tommy. And then she would say their name wrong. Like she would say, Danny Ellen, or you're gonna go with Ellen, and you're gonna go with Danny, and you're gonna pair up over here, and all this, right? And he would just calmly look up and say, Ellen, just Ellen. And then Danny Allen. Like, they would get the names confused, which I found kind of like, I was laughing about. Because there were times when she was trying to sound so dramatic and so almost Harry Potterish, like, whew, if you put a hat on her with a robe. Seriously, guys, and gave her a little, she was like, Danny Allen and Reagan and the, who? All you get together and fuse. Ding. And he would just answer like, I don't think I can do that. She would say, of course you can. You can. I don't think I can. Well, why not, dear? That is like, well, so and so. I don't like the things he does. Well, what things does he do? He plays baseball. There were moments I just went, oh! There were moments. So, a gentleman by the name of George Ebert, who took care of, was a medical tech, a psychiatric tech, plus another guy, gave interviews and would often say that Billy was just Billy. Billy was Billy. They never saw any other alters unless the doctors were coming in to specially interview him with cameras, with journalists, and with hypnosis and strong trance hypnosis suggestions. And then they would call the alters out. They would give him medicine and or an IV, and then use powerful suggestion and out would come the altars. And in the tape, you can see Billy, or whoever it was at that point, kind of like put his head up and become more aware, no longer be in the trance, and say, "Why do you keep doing this to me?" Suffice to say, through the docudrama, they prove that he is mentally insane to be charged, and they send him to Athens, or Harding Hospital, which is kind of like a glamour psychiatric hospital, where at the time every bigwig doctor that was studying it, Frank Putman, Bennett Braun, Cornelia Wilbur, Colin Ross, all these people that were studying, that were really the known people, Dr. Lutkiv, they were all, Dr. Carlson, they were all just in amazement of him, and they invited journalists. It became very much like, go back and read the book Medical Muses, Hysteria. So all these doctors were like, "Oh my God, we've got a male Sybil. Only he's got 24 personalities." See, Three Faces of Eve had three, that they knew of in the movie. Of course, Chris Costner Sizemore had more than that, but that's what they showed in the movie. Shirley Ardell Mason, 24. Him, 24. I think was it more than that? No, I think it was 16. 24 with Billy, started with 10, went up to 24. Sheila Porter said that was one of the first things she did not understand. It made no conceptual sense that the entire time she had taken care of him, he had 10 personalities. Suddenly he had 24. Suddenly they were calling a new group of them undesirables, and they were being locked away. And the concept of the teacher to everyone made no sense. The teacher was a fusion of the entire system, and the teacher could then orchestrate what everyone could do and teach everyone else what everyone else was doing. So kind of like, they used to tell us that would be like a recorder or a person keeping track of what's going on in your system group. Okay. So these are all very Wilburian-ish, and Putman, Bennett, Brahm, Cluft, Allison of the day. Until Dr. What's his name? Dr. Paul came along. So he gets put in Harding, then he gets moved to Athens. They want to put him in Lima, which is a warehouse for the insane. You go in there, you never come out, you die there. It's a horrible place. They want to put him in Lima State Facility. Okay? He may not have known what he did when he raped 4 women, assaulted them with a gun to their head. He may not have known what he did, but he still did the crime, and they want him in Lima. Okay. But the prosecutor is saying, I don't care which personality did it. I want him in jail, or I want him to be punished. Okay, so, or I'm sure one of the alters will come out eventually, and they'll be punished. So they don't really explain that too well, but it's the prosecutor wanting to get justice for these women, right? And that's his picture of justice. So, but everybody knows Billy is more than just somebody who needs help. Billy is a scientific experiment they can learn a lot from Billy. All of these psychiatrists hone in on it. They interviewed Dr. Colin Ross, they interviewed Dr. Bennett Braun, Dr. Frank Putman, Dr. Malowinski, Dr. Malowinska, Dr. Francis Allen, fantastic, Dr. Sheila Porter, Dr. Joyce Bunks, Dr. Dr. Call. Now, what it turns out is Dr. Call, who ends up taking care of after Dr. Athens and after Dr. Harding and Dr. Wilbur take care of Billy and Harding, Dr. Malowinski takes over and Dr. Call in Athens. But it turns out that Dr. Call is not really a board certified psychiatrist. He's not really got the credentials scientifically or the experience to really be even working with Billy. And everybody knows that. And Dr. Call pursues this because he's an opportunistic kind of guy. And he figures out that he can work with Billy one-on-one as long as they have what they call psychiatric medical television within these sessions. So the medical technician, George Ebert, who's always with Billy, is there to set up the monitors, and he would watch how Billy would just be Billy. And the doctors would all come in, and behind the medical television that they had in the hospital, Dr. Knopp, Knopp, would sit behind and kind of like supervise. So as long as he was being supervised, Dr. Call could work with Billy. Meanwhile, Dr. Call and Dr. Harding put a little word out to Daniel Keyes, who has written kind of a psycho kind of thriller book. He's got a novel under his belt. He's going for his doctorate. And he takes a shine to Billy. So he starts writing Billy's book and meeting with Billy. So there's doctors that are coming to Athens. There's journalists that are coming to Athens and authors wanting the story. And Billy is getting tons of fan mail and women that actually love him and want to marry him and are reaching out to him and saying, hey, I love you. I don't care what you did, blah, blah, blah. He meets one of his inmates' sisters, decides she's in love with him. They get married. 51 days later, she's like, bye-bye, see you later, and runs off with the royalties from the book. Billy does not get any real treatment in any of these facilities other than he is used like a circus animal, like a sideshow, like a medical muse. They've got a guinea pig, and they are going to examine him to smithereens. They've never had a male that many personalities with a crime where Dr. Wilbur, an expert, and Dr. Harding have said that's multiple. Okay. And he does have the trauma history that his family is accounting for up to a point. They say, yes, he was the targeted child. He was the most beaten by our father, adoptive father. Although the adoptive father denies that. The mother and sister and brother say, yes, Billy got it the worst. A neighbor sees Billy coming out of the barn, the infamous barn that he's beaten up in. Trigger warnings, trigger warnings. Billy draws a terrible beating where at 7 years old he is made to dig his own grave. A lot goes on there. Now his mother and his sister are saying that that never happened. And his brother is not saying anything. He's just saying we were regularly taken there to be beaten, and Billy would get it worse than me. And that's all. And that uh, and that actually the brother Jim put a knife to his adopted father's throat and backed him out of the door and told him, if you ever come back here, I'll kill you. It was a very violent home. Um, hmm, um, but Kathy Preston has said when she talked to Daniel Keyes about the book, it was very clear Billy would get half of the proceeds, Daniel Keyes would get the other half. That never happened. Billy never got anything. Dr. Call got half of the proceeds, and Daniel Keyes got the rest. Kathy went ahead and explained, the book was true up to this point, then it's fiction. And he said, I understand that, but in meeting with your brother, I wanted to meet Billy, and if Billy is all of these alters, I talked to all of them, and so whatever they said, I'm counting as their story. And we know that alters can lie just like people can lie. Okay, so she thought that was wrong that he added stuff that was fictional uh, regarding abuse, but she said that her and her mother and her brother came forward with the awful abuse that Billy did go through, but that there was no need to add on more horrific stuff. And she just thought it kind of added to this sensationalism that you would need in a book, which they didn't even need. So she was a very articulate, educated woman, and my heart just kept leaping to go out to her to want to give her a big hug. She had an infinite amount of love for her mother and understanding of why she did what she did. Got married 3 times, tried one more time to get married. Didn't just go off with the kids and say, okay, I'm going to just be that super mom in an era where they expect me to have a husband. I'm not going to be a widow or a divorcee. I'm going to provide to a father. She really understood that era and why women continued to fall into the same patterns. She also understood her brother, and she understood trauma, and so did Billy's brother. So did Billy's mother. Billy's mother said that from a young age, Billy was the I want to say soft child, pliable child. He would go along with anything. He wanted most to please, and that he was hurt the most by everything that went on, and that but there would be times where he would just not be Billy. Like she would be talking to him and in regular conversation and say his name, Billy, and he would look up at her like he didn't even know her, and he'd say, "Why are you calling me Billy?" From a young boy. Why are you calling me that name? And she would say, because I named you Billy at birth. And he would say, that's not my name. From young. That's very interesting to me, but that's where it ends as far as interesting. I think we can have dissociative features, and there can be, like in DDNOS, which they changed to other specified dissociative disorders. We know now that they've included in that label is you can have derealization, depersonalization, body dysphoria, and you can also have others, but no lost time. And that would be considered like DDNOS. You can feel like you have more than one, another identity, an alter identity, an aspect, part, persona, but there's no amnesia. That would just be a dissociative feature not otherwise specified or other specified dissociative feature. Dr. Colin Ross would argue that because Dr. Colin Ross has said in order to have, okay, well, maybe not. Because what Dr. Colin Ross has made very clear is he makes the distinction of MPD, DID by the amnesia between alter aspects. So he sticks clearly to Dr. Cornelia Wilbur's model. However, it's very interesting that Dr. Putman doesn't, that he acknowledges in this. If you don't watch it for the whole Billy Milligan story, watch it so you see how psychiatry changed and how these psychiatrists really had different views, and they were huge, and it was political, and there was a lot of money invested in it. Politicians invested in it, criminal law investigated in it, or invested in it, schools invested in it, the media invested in it. It just became a ticker tape parade of everybody getting money, but the people that were suffering. Billy went through, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 institutions, broke out of 3 of them that were maximum security. He did spend time in Lima where he kept ran into a doctor called Dr. Lewis Linder. Dr. Lewis Linder was a non-believer, was not going to have any of that ridiculous multiple personality. What he wrote down and what Dr. Brown wrote down is they believed that Billy was a sociopathic, antisocial, psychotic, schizophrenic. That's a whole lot of labels we don't hear anymore all jammed together. Psychio, so I'm going to say it wrong. Sociopathic, schizophrenic, antisocial, with dissociative features and alcohol usage. So again, psychosociopathic, antisocial, schizophrenic, with dissociative features and alcoholic. Now, the dissociative features are really important there because it can be that when he first went into custody, he was having dissociative features, in shock. I'm being arrested. Oh my gosh, they put me. Derealization, depersonalization. Where am I? I'm in shock. A fugue state, like Sheila Porter thought. First therapist, like his attorneys thought. Is this guy so checked out he can't assist? And then what is he, mentally unable to assist? What? Okay, so that will always be a question in my mind, but I will always come back to, I believe multiple personality became more of a defense, more of an excuse, and blown up more and more and more, and the numbers grew under the care of Dr. Cornelia Wilbur and Dr. Harding and Dr. Call. And then he was re-traumatized when he went into care with Dr. Linder into Lima, a hole where people just were thrown away. And then when they, because Lima's state was so horrible, they took it down and kind of broke it off into a bunch of different forensics units, like made it like Daytona Forensics, Mercenaries Forensics, all these different places. So he ends up, these are all high security, still maximum security, criminally insane. But Daytona had a little bit more treatment there with specialists. So they're all forensics. So wherever Billy went, media was. Journalists from the Lantern went to see him at all those places. One journalist, Susan Prenzner, said she watched him deteriorate, start to fracture and switch more under Dr. Linder's care in Lima because they were giving him Thorazine, and they took him off all of his medication that he was on from Dr. Call and Dr. Harding, which Dr. Wilbur had kind of a hand in too, was saying there is no treatment for multiple personality. There is no medication. So we usually give them is something to stop the stressors that would trigger switches and disassociating. So an anti-anxiety medication or an antidepressant. That's about it. Something to help them sleep, relax, keep them calm, but that's it. But nothing to sedate them or make them more fractured or more out of it, right? But Thorazine, you're going to be out of it. So they started giving him Thorazine and treating him for schizophrenia, which totally made him fall asleep more, not be able to do his artwork, not have any understanding of who was coming and going in his system group. And so people that were outside of psychiatry that were actually journalists that went to see him all the time and get his story and meet all the alters really realized that he decompensated and went down under Dr. Lewis Linder's care. So Billy continued to fight that. His sister was involved, his brother too. Eventually his brother went to Canada. He broke out of facility again, took off, and before that, a friend of his named Jim Murray. This guy was a producer of a 16 episode soap opera. And he thought he was a friend of Billy's, and he thought, wouldn't it be nice if we could portray you as just Billy? People have gotten to know you as the campus rapist, the person with multiple personality. But what if you came into a series just as you? And I was the one with the multiple personality, and we could get viewers to understand it better by you just being there and interacting with me. Billy signed on for that, did the 16 episodes with Jim Murray. They became fast friends, even more so. Jimmy and him would go out, do a little weed. Billy had all kinds of, I'm going to say Billy had all kinds of reward systems, I guess, and pleasantries that other people didn't get. He got celebrity treatment. He got to get a car while he was there, go off grounds, off campus. This is at Athens. He got to go off ground, off campus. People were worried about that. He took with another patient, a few of the female patients out. There was sex involved. There was drugs involved. So Dr. Malowinski was saying, this was very close to the very thing he was charged with. We were all responsible for him. So because of that, they removed him in the middle of the night, took him to Lima, the hole, where Dr. Linder took him off all the medicine Dr. Call gave him and put him on Thorazine. So the decline started then, and he fought being under Dr. Linder's care. And it didn't seem like anything he did was ever going to get him out of there. No matter how much interviewing he succumbed to, no matter what he did. At one point, Billy writes a letter and then says for the camera, most people don't know what real punishment is. I thought I knew what real punishment is, but I didn't. Real punishment is being under psychiatric care and having to work with psychiatrists and them working on you. Always. So he was being over therapized, big time, over pathologized. And I do believe that the facilities that he was in made him more invested in criminal behavior and having a reason to do that behavior. Even though Reagan and the undesirables and Adelina, the ones that did these crimes, were fused together and locked away, that all became undone. And you really can't lock that away and do all that. And one of the things that Dr. Frank Putnam said that really kind of knocked my socks off, because he was one of the granddaddies of pioneers of multiplicity, is at the end he said, what is fusion? What is it really? Nobody knows. It's fusion. It's whatever. Think about that. Think about that. I said that in an earlier video. When people fuse, merge, integrate, nobody knows what the heck it is. And so in the final defense, Dr. Wilbur and Dr. Harding said, Billy cannot stand trial because he is no longer Billy. Now that we've fused him, integrated him, taken the undesirables away, made the teacher out front on spot, the man that was Billy is no longer Billy. So the man you charged is no longer here. Yeah. Then, kind of gives me a headache. This friend of his, Jim Murray, helped him. He's running from the FBI. He's a fugitive. His brother helps him. His friend helps him. His friend gives him another identity. He says, you know, they're after Billy Milligan, but I mean, they're after you. You're on the run. They're after you. You're on the lam. I'm going to give you an identification. I'm going to have somebody make a social security card, a driver's license that says Christopher Carr. You're now Christopher Carr. Oh yeah, you really want to mess with somebody with MPD, DID, coming out of a facility, who's been on Thorazine, decompensating, and say, here's some weed, here's some alcohol, here's some money, and here's your new identity. You are Christopher Carr now. Okay, so now he starts running around as Christopher Carr. Now he's going all over. He's in Las Vegas, he's in Hollywood, he's living the life, he's from Florida he's all over the place. Runs into a guy who's going to start a business with. That guy goes, not that guy, another guy goes missing. A student goes missing. It ends up being somebody that he's stealing checks from. He goes missing. The landlady says these two are neighbors. They hung out together. They fought together. And this guy is missing. Only Christopher Carr is cashing Mike Madden's checks. A little further on down the road, a young black man goes missing. Horrible death. Billy tells one of his girlfriends, he's had several since his quickie marriage and divorce, from Canada, his inmate sister, who ran off with his book money. He threatens her. She gets scared, and he says, if you tell, I'll kill you. And he said, if you don't believe me, I have the glasses to a man I murdered. And he tells her he murdered Mike Madden. And he's still got the blood on the glasses. And he did. He had that. They didn't have a body. They didn't have the DNA then. And so he's still a missing man. When Dwight, I believe his name is Knight. I'm going to say his name wrong. I want to get it. he goes missing. His mother actually goes to see Kathy Preston, Billy's sister, and asks because Billy was near him, hung out with him. And Billy says, oh, we just went and smoked some dope together. We hung out, and then I don't know where he went. Spoiler alert, spoiler alert. Billy, in the end of his life, goes back to Ohio. His sister tries to do everything she can for him. She gets him a little like mobile home. Talk about the van life. He's just in a van. And then eventually in a nursing home and dies in 2014 of cancer. Before he dies, his caretaker, Kathy's daughter, Anna, is with him every day. And he reaches out to her and says, do you think God could forgive me? He's afraid to die because he's afraid God won't forgive him. And he admits that he's done bad things and he knows he's done bad things. And she said, I believe God will forgive anything if we ask. And he says, even killing people. And he goes on to explain that he killed many people and did horrible things that she never knew about. And she says, I still think God can forgive you. And so he has a deathbed confession that he killed people, raped people, and did things we'll never know. And that he was aware that he did it. So aside from all the, I think there's a disconnect between because he was multiple, did he do it? Or for me, it's because he was multiple, did he do more? Because he learned to operate in that behavior of, it's okay, I have an angry, violent alter. And I'll do this as Reagan, and I'll do this as Arthur, and I'll do this as whatever, right? He's got some kind of system, just like we understand our personality system as it is explained to us. The same goes for protectors, gatekeepers, children, littles, whatever you want to call your system group. We all know, we've been told this one's here because of this one's here because of that, this one operates this way, this one's role is this one's job is that, blah, 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 right? Did the whole thing get worse for Billy? Did more people die because he believed, I am this way? And I can do this because, but I know what I'm doing. So I'm leaning towards he was a man that had a lot of trauma, never really had a good chance, who never really got good treatment, who probably was traumatized and re-traumatized by each mental health facility as a young boy he went to, and then each facility in the jail system, and then all the media wanting him to perform, and the doctors drugging, hypnotizing, suggesting, insisting. In the end, he was a very manipulative man, which Dr. Francis Allen is first to say in the documentary. People with multiple personality learn to be manipulative because they're creating what they need. They will do whatever they need to get what they need. And they're not even subconsciously aware of it, but they will do what they need. So every time Billy's case started to get really dwindle, he would do something like escape from a maximum security place, or somebody would go missing that he was close to, or get married, or get a new girlfriend, or buy a a farm and cattle, and start raising them, or buy a car and go out, or do an art show, something to be back in the news. Or he would actively go against the state, sue the jail, go on a starvation diet, reach out to a journalist that would get the message out that he was going to kill himself if he didn't get out of there. So he was very manipulative to get released. And at the end, many of the doctors, Dr. Call, told his brother and his friend when he was a fugitive, get him to Sacramento. If you won't see Dr. Ralph Ellison, let God have him his way. So even after all Dr. Call, the notoriety, the book write-ups, the interviews, the royalty money, he just kind of said, see you later. In the end, what was the other? Another doctor, Dr. Harding, said it would be best if you just let him go off and be, and like fade away. Like, don't bring him back. There were a lot of people that actually said just. So we wonder, why did Billy just disappear at the end of his life? Pretty much every time he escalated his life to more showmanship of it escalated the multiplicity and somebody got missing or killed. So I don't know how to separate the two other than to say I truly believe he was very traumatized as a child. I believe he could have developed personas that held that anger and reacted to it when it wasn't happening. But more than that, I believe that he was deviant from a young child and had a very charming, sociopathic, antisocial personality that was capable of deceiving and conniving and hustling people and hurting people, and that he was the truest form of narcissist there is. Sad, but true. And you can make up your own decision, and that's why I like this better, because it's the true story, the whole story from many different views, and it's left to the viewer to make up your mind. And I think a crowded room with people reenacting it is just kind of Hollywoodish that we don't need. I think anybody that wants to understand multiple personality, dissociative identity disorder, the DSM from 1952 to now, how it comes together, all the doctors that were the doctors then, that were the committees that did the conferences, that did the specialty learned programs about all this and that, and worked in those facilities and made their own treatment centers. They are in this docudrama, every single one of them, including doctors from Britain, France, all over. You'll be pleasantly surprised at the amount of educated minds and medical experts specialized in the field that really do understand BID, MPD, and have all gone to their corners and taken their own side. And I love the way it was put together, where each person just told their view of what they knew of Billy and the whole situation, and nobody else was driving this docudrama. Okay, that is my longer than I wanted it to be. But 4 hours, 4 hours. So each episode is 4 hours. It's not going to be up for long. It's time limited. September 22nd. Happy autumn. Monsters Within. 24 Phases of Billy Milligan. Netflix. Go watch it. Any commentary, go ahead and put down here. I'd love to hear from you. And, subscribe and say hi and just let me know what you think. Thanks. Bye-bye.